Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're discussing a veteran and an eminently collectible, emerging vintage piece. Regarded by Omega enthusiasts, it is the pre-Bond Omega Seamaster 200 chronometer, a watch that launched in late 1988 and ran till about early 1994, superseded by the better-known SMP James Bond, the 300-meter chronometer. This is a watch that's an interesting transitional reference from the period when Omega resurrected itself in the aftermath of the quartz crisis and during the early years of SMH, a company that would later become the Swatch Group. As one of the twin pillars of Omega's re-emerging collection in this period, the Seamaster alongside the Speedmaster was instrumental in that recovery. You can see and you can own this one on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch, with additional accessories included in the sale, high resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this gorgeous late 80s Omega Seamaster 200 chronometer. Now this was actually, if you want to be totally precise, this watch was conceived during the Timothy Dalton era of 007, at which point you can't really envy Rolex for appearing in those movies. Omega had more urgent matters at hand, not so much product placement and sponsorship, but resurrecting a once great brand in the wake of near total collapse during the quartz crisis. The SSIH and ASWAG merger, forced by Swiss banks, initially helmed by Ernest Tomke and later by Nick Hayek Sr., saved the Omega brand, but there was still the matter of deciding what Omega should be going into the 90s. And the Seamaster and the Speedmaster were anchors of the line, but specific decisions still had to be made about what they would look like going forward. And this is an interesting transitional watch because it combines the cushion case profile and integrated bracelet aesthetic inherited from the late 1970s and the last of the great Omega mechanical watches, with a little bit of the profile that would eventually become the Seamaster 300-meter. It is fascinating, however, to look at an Omega watch that features Rolex-style Mercedes hands. Let's talk about how all of that vintage style fits and feels. 38.5 millimeters across the round of the case from 9 to 3, not including the crown and the stubby crown guards. It is a thin watch at 8.9 millimeters thick. It does slide underneath any cuff, and it's far more compact than the SMP 300 that succeeded it. Now, I'm going to give you the extremity to extremity rather than lug to lug dimension because it does take a proprietary interlink, so you either have to have a custom strap cut or you just need to leave it on the bracelet. Extremity to extremity across the wrist, the watch is a very reasonable, approximately 50 millimeters, so you can really wear this watch on a smaller wrist. I would say down to 13.5 centimeters in circumference. You'll have no trouble fitting this one comfortably. It is a very comfortable watch on the wrist, and that because of the regular and flat profile of the case back, it creates no pressure points or hot spots, as well as the souplesse of this handsome and charmingly antiquated bracelet. Now what you can see here is that there's a little bit of Patek Philippe Nautilus in that multi-link design. If you look carefully, it's actually a 2-link design that's adapted to look like a 3 with these H-section primary links and then the small intermediates between them. You can see pins and sleeves used for sizing back in the day, and before the SMP 300, the bracelet was very much like what you would get on a Rolex Submariner of the time, back when the 16610 was the thing. This is what was countering it from the House of Omega. Now the bracelet itself is a 1455-452 end piece combination, and it's nicely made. Again, Rolex is the reference point because this is very much like the oyster bracelet of the period, like what you'd find on the 93150 bracelet, complete with the stamped flip-out extension to wear it over a dive suit. You'll also note that the watch is wonderfully intact. All of the original stampings have depth and definition, and all of the original finishings still have their sharp grain where appropriate, and in a handful of places, the polish as intended by the factory. It is a very subdued case, though, with a gentle, rounded, high volume shape rather than a sharply defined set of lugs and center caseband angles and arcs and creases. It has a little bit of a sensuality about it, and it is very comfortable. I will say, however, that it is also purposeful in that the satin finish helps to avoid glare, and the same is true of the dial, which is a matte black. Now, the bezel itself might be considered a little bit easier to use than the one that succeeded it. It's certainly easier to grip, but just as sharp in its detents, and just as audible in its detents as the later SMP 300m. This is actually a little bit easier to grip because the knurling on the flank of the bezel itself is easier to grasp with your fingers, and I would understand that having lived with the SMP 300 for years, I own the original Bond chronometer, this would be far easier to actually manipulate if you wanted to use the watch with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. Now you'll also note that it's traditional anodized bezel insert with the original tritium-style luminescent pearl still intact. The dial features printed indices and a no-nonsense white-on-black backdrop. You'll note that it is a chronometer, it is automatic, it is the 200-meter water-resistant model. It does feature a screw-down crown, and inside it features a little bit of a more antiquated variant of the 2892A2 found in the Bonds. This is the 28922. Still 21 joules, automatic winding, 44-hour power reserve. It does feature the refinements you expect of the watch, including hacking seconds. And note, in addition to the Mercedes hour hand, that there is a delicious lollipop-style seconds hand with an extended counterweight. So we have that. We also have a quick set functionality for the date, so you can rapidly cycle it if the watch runs down or encounter an irregular length month. And it's principally because of that movement, which is nice and slim at just over 3.5 millimeters, that the watch can be so thin in profile. We may as well take a look at the case back because it is distinctive and it is distinctly different than the Seamasters that came after. The timepiece is no nonsense, and at the same time, it's a little bit more florid and lyrical about the form of its lugs and the integration of its bracelet than it strictly has to be for the sake of professional diving. This is a wonderful transitional watch, both because of the era from which it hails and the styles which it appropriates, not just from Omega's own references, but again, in the spirit of the Nautilus and that bracelet from elsewhere in the industry. This is a handsome, fun, and entry-level, I would say, first step into the world of vintage. Or if you're a dedicated Omega collector and you're looking to fill out your late 80s, early 90s collection, well, let's admit, it was a bit of a lean period for Omega mechanical watches. This is something like an essential entry in the canon that starts with the first Seamaster 300 in 1957 and continues through to today's Planet Oceans. This is a handsome, memorable, and wearable vintage watch, and because it's still a fairly modern timepiece, at about 30 years old, this is a watch that you can still send into service and expect to receive back in something like diveable condition. So it's not so old that it's become delicate, and I must emphasize, because it's by no means certain in this era, it does have a full sapphire crystal. You can see this one and put it on your wrist on our website. Omega Seamaster 200DR. You can see and you can own this vintage Omega diver on our website.